Okay, back for chapter 16. Let's see what some of your predictions were for see if your predictions were right for what problems Maniac's going to start having. So remember, chapter 15 ended with Maniac loved almost everything about his new life, but everything did not love him back. Okay, chapter 16. Maniac Magee was blind, sort of. Oh, he could see objects all right. He could see a flying fastball or a flying football or a John McNabb fastball better than anybody. He could see Mars Bar's foot sticking out, trying to trip him up as he circled the bases for a home run. He could see Mars Bar charging from behind to tackle him, even when he didn't have the football. He could see Mars Bar's bike veering for a nearby puddle to splash water on him. He could see these things, but he couldn't see what they meant. He couldn't see that Mars Bar disliked him, maybe even hated him. When you think about it, it's amazing all the stuff he didn't see, such as big kids don't like little kids showing them up. And big kids like it even less if another big kid, such as hands down, is laughing at them while some little kid is faking them out of their Fruit of the Looms. And some kids just don't like a kid who's different than them. Or a kid who's allergic to pizza, for example. Or a kid who does the dishes without being told. Or a kid who never even watches Saturday morning cartoons. Or a kid who's another color. Maniac kept trying, but he still couldn't see it, this color business. He didn't figure he was white any more than the EastEnders were black. He looked himself over pretty hard and came up with at least 7 different shades and colors right on his own skin, not any of them being what he would call white, except for his eyeballs, which weren't any whiter than the eyeballs of the kids in the East End. Which was a big relief to Maniac, finding out he wasn't really white, because the way he figured, white was about the most boring color of all. But there it was, piling up all around him. Dislike. Not from everybody, but enough. And Maniac couldn't see it. And then all of a sudden, he could. All right, did any of you predict that Mars Bar was part of the problem with everybody not loving him back? And like it said, not just Mars Bar, but some people were just kind of don't have much of a tolerance for someone who's different than them, or a little kid that's showing them up. Not that he's bragging, but he's he's better than everybody. And I think some kids are starting to just not like this new white kid that's in their area and is better than them at sports and just different than them. Sometimes we talked about at the beginning of this book, people don't like people that are different than them, and we can't quite figure out why. Okay, so that was the end of chapter 16 when it says he couldn't see all this dislike piling up around him, and then all of a sudden he could. Okay, any more predictions for why he could, for what's going to happen? Maybe he's going to start noticing Mars Bar's doing these things that aren't just by accident. We'll see. Let's move on here to chapter 17. It was a hot day in August. It was so hot. If you stood still too long in the vacant lot, the sun bouncing off a chunk of broken glass or metal could fry a patch on your hide. It was so hot. If you were packing candy, you had soup in your pocket by 2 o'clock. So hot, the dogs were tripping over their own tongues. I think we see a lot of hyperbole there and how hot it is, huh? And it was so hot that the fire hydrant at Green and Chestnut Street was gushing like Niagara Falls, courtesy of somebody wrenching off the cap. By the time Maniac and the rest of the vacant lot regulars got there, Chestnut and Green was a cross between a block party and a swimming pool. Radios blaring, people blaring, somebody selling lemonade, somebody selling Kool-Aid ice cubes on toothpicks, bodies, skin, colors, warm, gleaming, buttery, warm, cool water, screaming, wet, happy. The younger you were, the fewer clothes you had on. Grown-ups sat on the sidewalk and just dangled their bare feet into the running gutters. Teenagers stripped down to bathing suits and cutoffs. Little kids, underwear. Littlest kids, nothing. Maniac danced and pranced and screamed around with the rest of them. He learned to jump in front of the gusher and let it propel him halfway across the street. He joined in a snake dance. He got goofy. He drenched himself in all the wet and warm and happy. When he first heard the voice, he didn't think much of it. Just one voice in hundreds. But then the other voices were falling away in bunches until only this one voice was left. It was a strange voice, deep and thick and sort of clotted, as though it had to fight its way out through a can of worms before coming out. The voice was behind him, saying the same word over and over, calling a name. And even then, Maniac only turned because he was curious, wondering what everybody else was staring at. But then he saw a brown finger pointed right at him, not a speck of icing on it, and a brown arm that aimed it, and a brown face behind it. And he knew that the name coming out of that can of worm mouth was his. Whitey, he called him. And it surprised him that he knew. He just stood there, blinking through the water drop sun blur, the hydrant gusher smacking his thin bare ankles. Now the radios and the people were silent. You move on now, Whitey, the man said. You pick up your gear and you move on out. It's time for you to go home now. The man was close enough to be catching some water around his shoes, which Maniac noticed were actually slippers. His pants were baggy and his shirt wasn't even really a shirt, just a pajama top covered with high-tailed roosters. White hair curled around his ears. Maniac gave his answer, I am home. The man took a step closer and dropped his arm. You go on home now, son. You go back to your own kind. I seen you at the block party. Now you get going. Maniac stepped out of the gusher and the water roared to the opposite curb. Well, this is where I live, he said. I live right down there, he pointed. He pointed toward Sycamore. The man didn't seem to notice. Never enough, is it, Whitey? Just want more and more. You won't even leave us our own little water on the street. Come on down to see the Bojangles. Come on down to the zoo, to the monkey house. Is that what you're thinking, boy? He must be hard of hearing, Maniac thought. So Maniac called it out really loud and slow and pointed again. I live at 728 Sycamore. I do. The old man stepped closer. You got your own kind. It's how you wanted it. Let's keep it that way. Now move on. Your kind's waiting. He pointed toward the west end. Up there. Suddenly, Hester and Lester were by Maniac's side, barking at that man. You leave him alone, you old rag picker. You shut up. And the man was croaking, ranting, not really ranting to Maniac anymore, but to the people. Well, what happens when we go over there, huh? Black is black and white is white. The sheep lie not with the lion. The sheep knows his own kind. Then a woman came rushing toward him, pulling him away up the street. Even as she pulled, he was still yelling, our own kind, our own kind. And then water thundered across the silent street. Is that what you expected? Did anybody expect that we have an older man that's yelling at Maniac to go back to his own kind? Now, I think the reason they gave this description of the man with the crazy white hair and a pajama top was to let us know that this maybe isn't the most stable man. But still, this is a guy that lives in the East End, and he's saying, hey, blacks and whites are supposed to stay separate. You go back to where you belong. And so far, he's the only one that told Maniac that, but maybe he's not going to be the only person that thinks that. Maniac, who was one of the world's great sleepers, did not sleep well that night or the next. He started getting up earlier than usual, not to sneak some time with the A-book, just to run. Bow Wow wasn't even ready for his morning pee yet, but he went along. Usually, Maniac just jogged around the East End, but now he did up the whole town, plus over the river to Bridgeport. By the third day, Bow Wow refused to go along. One morning, as Maniac was heading home, Hester and Lester came running up Sycamore. Maniac, come on, we're going to run too. Let's go that way. They tried to turn him around, but he told them to just hold on a minute. He wanted to stop home for a quick drink, and then he'd go running with them. They kept yelling and tugging and pushing and grabbing his legs. And then Amanda was on her bike, pedaling frantically up to him, slapping on a quick smile and gasping, hey, I'm going to go to the store. Want to come? Maniac checked the sun. It was hardly even up to the second stories. Stores aren't open yet, he said. Amanda just gawked. She was a rotten liar, Maniac knew. So what do you think? Seems like Amanda and Hester and Lester are just trying to keep Maniac from going back home. Any ideas about why that might be? So he shook loose from the little ones and trotted on. He didn't know what, but something was wrong. The little ones jabbered and screeched and grabbed, and he ran faster and faster. Mrs. Beale was out front with the yellow bucket, soap suds spilling over the brim, a stiff bristle brush in her hand, and she was scrubbing the house, the brick wall, scrubbing furiously at the chalk, grunting with the effort, her cheeks wet. But he'd been way too early, way too fast. Only the first letter, the F, had been scrubbed away. The rest was quite easy to read. The tall yellow letters the same color as the scrub bucket, and it said, Ishbelly, go home. Remember when Mars Bar first met him and was yelling at him and calling him Fishbelly? And now we see that again. Any idea what that word might mean? If you think about the belly of a fish, it's kind of white, right? So that's kind of a nasty word for white people that Mars Bar called him. And now someone wrote that on the Beale's house in chalk, Fishbelly, go home. It was sweet, I think, that Amanda and all the Beales tried to keep Maniac from seeing it, tried to keep that from him. Now we have a couple of things that happen, right? We have that man yelling at him at the block party. And then we have this happening to the house. How do you think Maniac's going to react to this? Chapter 18. Amanda tried to reason with him. Oh, you can't listen to that old coot. He's goofy. He's always saying stuff like that. You can't go because of something some nutty old coot says. Maniac pointed out that it wasn't the nutty old coot who chalked the front of their house. Amanda laughed. That? Oh, that's no big deal. It wasn't even paint. If they had really met it, it would have been done in paint. And anyway, don't you know they did my mother a favor? It gave her a chance to get out the old bucket and do some serious scrubbing. Ever since the kids stopped crayoning the house, she hasn't known what to do to herself. Now she's with herself. Now she's happy again. Maniac didn't answer. Amanda didn't understand that most of the hurt he felt was not for himself, but for her and the rest of the family. She stomped her foot. You gotta stay. I don't gotta do anything. So it looks like Maniac's trying to leave. He's planning on running away again because of what's happening. I thought it was kind of sad, too, how he says he's not that hurt for himself, but he doesn't want to bring any hurt or any bad things to the Beales. Well, if you go, you'll starve, Amanda said. Well, was I starving before I came here? Well, no, but you'll freeze to death in the winter. Your fingers will get so stiff they will break off like icicles, Amanda told him. I'll go somewhere. Somewhere? Where, like the deer pen? I'll be okay. Or, Amanda said, maybe Prairie Dog Town, huh? How about that? She jabbed him. You can go live in a gopher hole. You'd be starving, so that would be perfect, because then you'd be so skinny you could fit right down there, all snugly in their little tunnels. He shrugged. Yeah, sounds cozy. This was driving Amanda bonkers. He was acting so different, all glum and all these wiseacre answers, as if he didn't care, not about anything. Yeah? Well, she sniffed. Well, what are you going to do for a pillow, huh? I know you put my pillow on the floor. I'll use a hibernating gopher, he said. Huh, funny. And the bathroom, huh? Where will you go to the bathroom? The bushes, McDonald's, lots of places. She hated it. He had an answer for everything. And the scariest part was he was probably right. If anybody could survive on the loose, it would be this kid who showed up from Holidaysburg, who slept on floors, who outran dogs. He was making her so mad. She pointed at him. She sneered. Well, I'll tell you one thing, buddy boy. You better shut the door on your way out and lock it, because if I get my room back, I'm not giving it up again. So don't ever come crawling back around here. She kicked him in the sneaker. You hear? Why do you think she's being so mean? I think it's because she cares, right? And she's so upset. Don't worry, he said flatly. And don't think you're taking any of my books with you this time either. And you can forget about ever getting a chance to open my Encyclopedia A, which I was almost ready to let you do before you went and started acting all poopy. He said, I'll join the library. She jumped up. Ha! You can't. No, you need a library card. I'll get one. Aha, she said. You can't get a library card without an address. She regretted it as soon as she said it. His head swung. His eyes met hers. His eyes said, why did you say that? Her eyes couldn't answer. He got up and went out the door and trotted up the street. Amanda cried. She tore a magazine in half. She punched the sofa. She kicked an easy chair. She kicked Bow Wow. Bow Wow went yelping into the kitchen. "See," she yelled at the front door. "See what you made me do, Jeffrey McGee.